Welcome to the Aussie Football Passport, your one-stop pod for updates on your favourite Aussie men and women footballers who are playing their club careers abroad. I'm your host, Alex, and it feels like deja vu because there is a serious injury, this time to a Socceroos hopeful, that could potentially rule him out of the World Cup. There's also Socceroos news in terms of selecting their base for the World Cup, news regarding the men's Olyroos coach, and the usual wrap of goals. There's plenty of them this week, I can assure you. There's assists, there's clean sheets, and everything else in between. Also, just a quick note to let you know that last week's episode was recorded on Monday, Australian time. So I've included the games that I missed in last week's episode in this episode for you. So you do not go wanting for updates on your favourite Aussie men and women footballers abroad. All right, let's get straight to the headlines. Let's start with one final bit of transfer news as the A-League transfer window wrapped up last week, and it's to do with Apostolos Stamatoulopoulos, who has returned to the A-League with Sydney FC as he chases a World Cup spot. He's on loan from Motherwell for the rest of the season, where he had fallen out of favour despite being quite handy in front of goal for the Scottish side. So a bit disappointing, but completely understandable for Apostolos's chances in terms of trying to make this World Cup squad. There's also an option for Sydney FC to buy the striker at the end of the loan. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Now to other headlines, and the Socceroos have selected their base for the World Cup in June and July of this year. The Socceroos will be based at the Oakland Roots Soul training facility, and Tony Popovic and the Socceroos staff believe it is the most comfortable setting for our lads. Now let's hear from Tony Popovic on the training camp base selection.
And then you must find a base camp on that side. That was probably a side of the country we didn't expect to get. So we did a lot of work on the east and central, touched on the west, so we had to go back there, and the staff did a great job. We had 4 or 5 fantastic options. And then it comes down a little bit to FIFA, and there are other things involved in terms of rankings and what options you get and who gets first priority. So we got the base camp that we wanted. And
thanks to Football Australia for that audio clip of Tony Popovic there. Now to other news, where Tony Vidmar will leave his role as the coach of the Olyroos men's side, so the under-23 side. He's been in charge for 4 years and brought through a number of the current Socceroos side. Here's what he had to say in an interview with Football Australia about his time in charge of the Olyroos.
Then to take on the Olympic team, the under-23 team, was always challenging. You know that it's never an easy situation, but taking those learnings and what I've learned before, and being previously in an under-17s role, I had a fantastic time. You know, the last 3 years, especially with the 23s, you want to win. Win games, you want to qualify for tournaments, you want to do well, but I think also the added experience or the added things that you need in that role is to be able to close the gap for those younger players to go through and to be Socceroos. I think that's always the link there with the team. It's such an important role to play, and I think having a number of players over the years going through now, and there are a few just on the edge of being called up.
Credit to Football Australia once again for that audio. Now to injury news, and we've got a bit to get through this week. Charlie Grant is close to returning from a knee injury for Tottenham Hotspur, which is great news, hopefully just in time to be announced in that Matildas squad for the Asian Cup. Mary Fowler was unavailable for Manchester City at the weekend as she picked up a slight knock in training, it's been revealed. So let's hope she's back soon. We don't need another setback for one of our star Matildas with that Asian Cup. Only 2 weeks away, if you can believe that. Now, Lewis Miller, he came off the bench at halftime in Blackburn Rovers' 3-1 win over QPR on the weekend, but unfortunately he came off quickly after, about 10 minutes after coming on the field, as he looks to have suffered an Achilles injury. The injury happened off the ball, which is never a good sign. Fingers crossed it is not as bad as it looks. Unfortunately, there was confirmation from Football Australia and Blackburn Rovers that Lewis suffered a ruptured Achilles injury and he's been ruled out for the World Cup. Specifically, he has been ruled out for 9 months in total. What a devastating blow for him and the Socceroos. All the best in recovery to Lewis. And in yet another blow to the Socceroos, Sam Silvera has broken a metatarsal in his foot and is not expected back until April, according to journalist James Dodd. Now to Craig Goodwin. Of course, he doesn't play abroad, but he is a hopeful for the Socceroos World Cup squad. And in some unfortunate news, it looks like he is ruled out for 10 to 12 weeks with a groin injury. He limped off in Adelaide's home defeat to Newcastle Jets, which was not on the weekend just gone, but the weekend before. So it's a cracking game, by the way. But unfortunate news for Craig, and it's looking pretty tough to see how he will make it back in time for the World Cup squad. But let's keep everything crossed for Craig because he has been a wonderful player for the Socceroos over the years. Well, that is it for the headlines. Next, we'll move on to the weekly wrap. All right, weekly wrap time, and let's start with our ladies, or lady in USA. Morgan Aquino, she started and played the full game in goal for DC Power in their 1-1 draw with Tampa Bay Sun. The result means that they slipped down to 8th spot on the table, only 3 points away from 4th. So it is a congested table there, and plenty of movement can be made if you put back-to-back results together. Now, I have an apology to make too. I missed Emily Gilnick's return from injury in last week's episode. She has returned from injury with her side Monterrey in the 2-0 win over Tijuana Club in the Mexican League on the 7th of February, coming on as a second-half substitute in the 75th minute. Her side then played 3 days later, but she did not get any minutes from the bench as they repeated the same scoreline, this time against Toluca. Then at the weekend just past, Emily made an appearance from the bench in the 61st minute as Monterrey drew 1-1 with Club America. Great to see Emily back. Now to Sweden, where the ladies' season kicked off with Swedish Cup action. And let's start with FC Rosengard, who drew with Vitsio thanks to an added time equaliser for the away side. Daniela Galic started and played 87 minutes for Rosengard, whilst Remy Simonsen debuted for her new side, starting and playing the full game. Malmo FF was defeated by Pattaya IF 3-2. Amy Sayer started and played 71 minutes for her new club, whilst her teammate Courtney Nevin was not in the matchday squad. There's no reason for that, but we will follow it up. It might just be a case that she's returned late back to the team. Now, let's head to England, where Arsenal continued their Champions League campaign with a 4-0 win over OH Leuven. Caitlin Ford started and played the full game and provided 2 assists in that very comfortable win, whilst Kyra Cooney-Cross came off the bench in the second half, getting 18 minutes in her first appearance for her club in 2026. Steph Cutley was an unused substitute, getting a well-earned rest. Arsenal was meant to play Brighton and Hove Albion on the weekend, but the match has been postponed due to a waterlogged pitch. Emily Van Egmond started and played the full game for Leicester in their heavy 6-0 loss to Manchester City. Unfortunately, Leicester remain at the bottom of the table by 1 point, but they have a game in hand. Alana Kennedy started and played the full game at centre-back for the London City Lionesses as they went down 2-1 to Manchester United. Claire Wheeler started and played the full game in Everton's midfield as they beat West Ham 1-0. Katrina Gorry was not in the matchday squad for West Ham. Chelsea remained in the top 3 of the WSL with a 2-0 victory over Liverpool. Ellie Carpenter started and played the full game for Chelsea, while Sam Kerr was a second-half substitute, getting 26 minutes in her 150th game for the club. Now, brace yourselves. How about this for a scoreline? Tottenham defeated Aston Villa 7-3. Who said football was boring? Claire Hunt started and played the full game for Tottenham. However, she will miss her side's next match due to an accumulation of yellow cards, meaning she will be suspended. Now let's drop down to the WSL2, where Caitlin Torpey started and played the full game for Newcastle as they defeated Portsmouth 2-0. The win puts them into third place on the table and helps their promotion chances. Now, Nottingham Forest game against Sunderland was also postponed due to a waterlogged pitch, a bit of a theme there in England. Now let's head to Germany, where Haley Rasso came on in the 74th minute of Eintracht Frankfurt's 4-0 win over FC Nordstrand. It was the first leg of the quarterfinal tie in the UEFA Europa Cup competition. This result puts Frankfurt in a commanding position with the second leg to be played next week. She didn't play at the weekend as her side beat Carl Zeiss Jens 4-1. Jamila Rankin was a second-half substitute for Hoffenheim, playing 7 minutes of their surprise 4-0 defeat to Hamburg SV. Rounding out the action in Germany with Leia Varley, who was substituted onto the pitch for Nuremberg in their 3-1 loss to Leipzig. She was substituted on at half-time, I should add. She did her job preventing Leipzig from getting on the score sheet in the second half, as her side scored not long after half-time but were unable to mount a miraculous comeback there. Now, let's wrap up our ladies' action in Italy, where Giacinta Galabadaracci came on in the second half to get 22 minutes for Sassuolo in their 2-0 loss to Como. Unfortunately, it looks like Jessica Nash has lost her place in the side, as she was on the bench and did not get onto the pitch in that game. Winona Heatley started and played the full game for Roma, as they dropped a 2-0 lead to draw with Napoli 2-2. Now to our men in England and Wales in the Championship. Riley McGree starred for Middlesbrough, producing a goal and an assist in a man-of-the-match performance for his side as they secured a 2-1 win over Sheffield United in midweek. He started and played 67 minutes in that game. To be honest, that kind of performance would typically get you the Men's Player of the Week award, but there's another young lad who's doing even better than this, if you can believe that. Riley McGree then played until added time in Middlesbrough's 3-1 loss to Coventry in the top of the table clash on Monday night local time in the Championship. He scored his side's only goal, spurring a brief moment for a fight back before a penalty was awarded to Coventry to make it 3-1. Cameron Burgess played a full game for Swansea City in a 2-0 loss to Callum Elder's Derby County. Alder also played the full match, helping his side to a clean sheet and providing an assist as they strengthened their push for the Championship playoffs to win promotion to the Premier League. He has provided 5 assists this season as he pushes his case for Socceroos selection next month in that left back or left wing back role. Adrian Segacic played 76 minutes for Portsmouth in a 1-0 loss to Sheffield United at the weekend. He was substituted off after colliding with the opposition goalkeeper, so hopefully he is okay, and we'll bring you news of whether he is in next week's episode. Daniel Benny started and played 68 minutes of QPR's 3-1 loss to Blackburn Rovers, as we alluded to earlier in the show, of course, with that horrific injury to Lewis Miller. Keely Adamson was on the bench but got no minutes for QPR. Now dropping down a division to League One, where Rafael Borges Rodriguez got off the bench in the 67th minute in Wigan's 2-1 loss to Reading in midweek. He then played 77 minutes for Wigan Athletic in a 4-0 loss to Arsenal in the FA Cup. Alex Robertson played 89 minutes and registered an assist in Cardiff City's 3-1 win over Luton Town. Cardiff now extends their unbeaten run to 11 games as they look to secure automatic promotion to the Championship. Rounding out the League One action with Caleb Watts, who got 61 minutes for Plymouth Argyle in their 4-0 win over Blackpool. He also managed a goal in that one, so well done, Caleb. Now in Scotland, Martin Boyle played 73 minutes while Jack Iredale played a full game for Hibs as they lost 1-0 to Hearts in midweek and in the Edinburgh derby. Ante Suto came on in the 60th minute for Hibs in that game. Then at the weekend, both Martin Boyle and Ante Suto came on in the 64th minute, whilst Jack Iredale played a full game as Hibs bounced back from their Edinburgh derby defeat with a 2-0 win over St Mirren. Suto scored another goal for his new side in the win and surely is doing as much as he can possibly to cross Tony Popovic's radar for potential Socceroos selection. Ryan McGowan played a full game for Livingston in a 2-1 loss to Celtic in midweek. He then played a full game for Livingston in a 2-2 draw with Dundee at the weekend. Oscar Priestman was the sole Aussie in Motherwell's side as they drew 1-1 with Rangers. The midfielder was substituted into the game at halftime in their midweek game. Nicholas Milanovic was an unused substitute for Aberdeen in a 2-0 win over Motherwell, who had Oscar Priestman starting and playing the full game in midfield. Dundee United had a 3-2 win over the surprise packets of the Scottish Premier League, Falkirk. All three of our Aussies, Ashley Maynard Brewer, Ryan Strain and Zach Sapsford, started and played the full game. Zach managed to provide an assist in what has been a very good season for him so far, and another one that could well be on Tony Popovic's radar. Now to Italy, where Alessandro Cercati played the full game for Parma as they beat Hellas Verona 2-1, courtesy of a last-minute winner. How good is that? Now let's head to Germany, where Jackson Irvine played 69 minutes for St. Pauli in their heavy 4-0 loss to Bayer Leverkusen. Connor Metcalf remains out injured. Now to Spain, where Matt Ryan started and played the full game in goal for Levante as they lost 2-0 to his former club Valencia in another local derby there. Now to Croatia, where Fran Karasic played 70 minutes for NK Osijek in a 2-0 loss against his former side, Hajduk Split. Anthony Kalic was in the side on the bench but got no minutes in that game. Now to the Netherlands, where Jordan Boss started and played a full game for Feyenoord in a 1-0 win over Go Ahead Eagles. Aden Rustic played a full game for Heracles Alamello in a 1-0 loss to Max Ballard's NAC Breda in a crucial relegation battle match that sees Breda move out of the relegation zone and plants Heracles at the bottom of the table. Ballard played the full game for Breda, whilst Reece Bozanovsky debuted, getting 31 minutes for Heracles. Now to Austria, where Jed Drew continued his return from injury with another substitute appearance, this time getting 17 minutes for his side Hartberg in their 0-0 draw with Rheindorf Altach. Jacob Italiano started and played 79 minutes for Grazer AK in their 1-1 draw with Red Bull Salzburg. It's a timely return for the fullback with Lewis Miller's injury. Jacob should get that right wing back spot in the Socceroo side. Now to Denmark, where Paul Itzo started and played the full game in goal for Randers FC and kept a clean sheet in their 2-0 win over Villers Boldklub. Moussa Toure was a late substitute coming on for 7 minutes for Randers. Now to Poland, where Denny Juric started and played 71 minutes for Wisła Płock in their 1-0 loss to Piast Gliwice. Now to Cyprus, where Milos Degenek started and played the full game for Apoel Nicosia in their 3-2 win over Enosias Neon Parelni FC in the Cypriot Cup. Now, that is an absolute mouthful, and I hope I've pronounced that as correctly as possible. He then played a full game again for his side, Apoel FC, in league action and scored his first goal as, unfortunately, his side went down 3-2 to Ethnikos Akna FC at the weekend. Now to Czechia, where Garan Quol started and played 58 minutes for Sparta Prague in a 2-0 win over FC Hradec Králové. Now, rounding out the action in Japan, where Kasuni Yengi came off the bench in the 80th minute for Cerezo Osaka in a 2-0 win over Avispa Fukuoka. Jason Guerrier played a full game for Alberix Niigata in a 4-0 loss to Tokushima Vortesu in the J2, which is the Japanese second division. All right, that is it for the weekly wrap. Next is Players of the Week, and I'll wrap up the show for this week. All right, Players of the Week, and let's start with our Woman of the Week. It's Alex Shidiak, who scored her second goal for Como as they defeated Sassuolo 2-0. As made mention earlier in the show, you probably were wondering why Alex Shidiak wasn't mentioned, and this is why. So her goal came in the first half of the contest and no doubt sent a timely reminder to Joe Montemuro of her talents. Of course, Joe Montemuro does have a bit of a decision to make with Mary Fowler, and her knock at training is not ideal, particularly when the Asian Cup is 2 weeks away. So it's a difficult position for Joe. What will he do? Will he stick or will he twist in terms of selecting Mary Fowler? And could Alex Shidiak be someone that comes into the side either with Fowler or at her expense. Definitely a bit of a headache for Joe, and we don't envy him with that decision to be made. Now to our men's player of the week, and lightning does strike twice because Mohamed Toure is on one at the moment, it's fair to say. He scored a hat-trick on his starting debut for Norwich in a 3-0 away win over Oxford in championship action in midweek. He then came off the bench in the 61st minute and continued his exceptional start to life at Norwich, scoring his 5th goal since joining the Canaries in what was a 3-1 FA Cup victory over West Bromwich Albion. The young man is on fire. And don't we absolutely love to see this? I think we may have our Socceroos number 9 right here, folks. How good is this to see? Keep up the good work, Mo, and we look forward to seeing if you can back it up with another goal at the weekend in Norwich's next game. All right, well, that is it for another week of the Aussie Football Passport. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I've really enjoyed bringing it to you, especially with Mo Toure in the form he is in. It is so good to see. If you know anyone that might like this episode, please share it with them. Anyone that might like the show, please share it with them as well, because it will help this show get into as many ears as possible. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.